Hey guys, it's Amanda. In today's video, I'll be covering topics that concern weight loss, thin ideals, and eating disorders, so I want to put a trigger warning up front in case you are not interested in hearing about those things. Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of chatter about thin being back in.
I hate to say it, but we've got to prepare for the thin is in culture shift.
Thin is finally back in.
Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of conversations about how the whole being skinny, being thin thing is back in.
So I don't know if y'all have been paying attention to the signs, but we are re-entering a thin is in era.
It's been attributed to the return of low-rise jeans, the spike in Ozempic usage, and the fall of Kim Kardashian's butt. In their 2023 procedural report, the American Society of Plastic Surgeons saw a continued movement toward what they dubbed the ballet body. And while they described this as a harmonious, proportionate, and elegantly contoured body shape, to me, ballet body sounds like code for skinny. Like really skinny. Perhaps this is the writing on the wall, or rather the operating table, that thin is back in.
Who needs a master's degree when you're skinny?
Thinspo.
Stop eating.
Big back, biggity back.
I'm
Being
just
fat
saying
is
the
beautiful, but it's disgusting
Stop
on
eating.
me.
Don't you want to look like the Slavic
Listen,
doll?
I hate the phrase thin is in for so many reasons, but one of my biggest gripes is that it implies that being thin was at some point in recent history undesirable, which is simply untrue. Declaring that thin is in is tantamount to finding a fork in the kitchen or a theater kid being annoying. It's just sort of how things are. And I know people might point to the body positivity movement, outsized BBLs, and slim thick influencers to say otherwise, but those trends gained popularity despite the fact that thinness reigned supreme, not because its chokehold on us ever went away. I think the maxim is a bit misleading because it suggests that there is a changing cultural ideal, but skinny never went out of style. I think it's more about access. Thin isn't in because some arbiter of taste said so. Thin is in because drugs that induce weight loss are being prescribed at unprecedented rates. In 2022, more than 5 million prescriptions for Ozempic, Mounjaro, Rybelsus, or Wegovy were written for weight management compared with just over 230,000 in 2019. That's over a 2,000% increase. It's less that thin is in and more that thin has become a relatively accessible choice. It also happens that the people who have access to these medications are those who have a lot of money and happen to get a lot of attention. Celebrities.
One hot topic everyone in Hollywood still seems to be talking about is Ozempic.
This morning, Kelly Clarkson setting the record straight. The Grammy Award-winning singer revealing for the first time that she uses medication for weight loss.
Talk show host Chelsea Handler is dishing on Ozempic.
Today, Oprah Winfrey sent Weight Watchers stock prices tumbling when she stepped down as the company's spokesperson after confirming recently she's taken medication to lose weight.
Welcome to the 82nd Golden Globes, Ozempic's biggest night.
Since the dawn of celebrity culture, stars' weight have often overshadowed the projects they promote and produce. In 1924, an MGM executive famously told Swedish-born movie star Greta Garbo, "In America, men don't like fat women." A century later, little has changed. In 2024, as the press tour for Wicked began, much of the conversation centered not on the film itself, but on Ariana Grande's weight. Ariana Grande is 31 years old and has been in the public eye since she was a child, so obviously her appearance has changed over the years. She had her Italian X era, her redhead era, her Asian era, her black era.
I'm like, bitch, that's my cookie. It's my juice, okay? Carry on.
And now she's in her Glinda era. She's embraced pale skin, bleached eyebrows, and dyed her hair platinum blonde to resemble the character. She even started speaking in this much softer, higher-pitched voice to add to this new ethereal aesthetic. But one of the most noticeable differences in Ariana's appearance is her weight. She's always been thin, but her more recent weight loss is a little jarring to say the least, and has very obviously changed how she looks. Her face looks much more taut and angular, certain bones are more visible than before, but what surprised me even more was the appearance of her co-star, Cynthia Erivio, who also appears to have gone a dramatic weight loss. Prior to Wicked, Cynthia Erivio had a pretty muscular and athletic build, but it was apparent that she lost a lot of weight by the time the press tour rolled around. While being thin is the norm for women in Hollywood, being extremely thin is the norm for white women in Hollywood. The waif aesthetic is not as common among prominent Black actresses, and specifically dark-skinned Black actresses. I don't know why Cynthia lost weight, and I'm not trying to speculate on it, but I want to use her appearance as a jumping off point to talk about what the narrative of thin is in means for Black women. In theory, thinness has no color, but in practice, it is overwhelmingly associated with and glorified by white women. The heroin chic aesthetic of the 1990s epitomized a specific cultural obsession with extreme thinness, characterized by pale skin, visible bones, and a generally unwell or emaciated look. The aesthetic emerged against a backdrop of white-dominated fashion magazines, ad campaigns, and entertainment, which set the tone for the beauty standards of the time. This ideal was embodied by white supermodels like Kate Moss. Black women were largely excluded from these spaces, so the heroin chic ideal didn't reflect or resonate with Black cultural narratives in the same way. Today we live in a more integrated and less racially siloed media landscape. While there have always been Black women who aspire to be thin, it was never as explicitly tied to mainstream cultural narratives. I think this is why I find Cynthia Erivio's current appearance, coinciding with the Thin is In reports, to be so interesting. There's a handful of Black women celebrities who have also been linked to this, such as Ice Spice, who has garnered attention for her weight loss. The purpose of this video isn't for me to comment on celebrities' bodies, but in light of this Thin is In narrative in full force, I want to discuss Black women's relationship with thinness because I find it incredibly interesting and it's not often talked about. I initially wanted to talk about this because of something that happened on TikTok a few months ago, and I know if something happened on TikTok a few months ago, it probably feels like a lifetime ago at this point, but I still think it's relevant with the subject matter of this video. So let's get into it. The Slim Kim controversy. If you don't know about this controversy, congratulations, your brain is officially not rotted, but I'll fill you in. In November 2024, Slim Kim, a lifestyle content creator, posted this video and all hell broke loose.
My favorite thing to be is skinny. And I fear you cannot say that out loud, but it is my favorite thing to be, and it is my favorite fear to not be. And this is just for me personally. This is all personal to me. But I just wanted to say it out loud because honestly, it's all I think about. It's all I think about.
A lot of people had a lot to say about this clip. Many people agreed with Slim Kim's sentiment, but it got just as much, if not more, backlash. And of course, this resulted in the backlash to the backlash because that's just sort of how the internet goes. The initial wave of backlash came from people who viewed Slim Kim's statement as someone with a privileged status, being thin, bragging about it, and promoting fat phobia. And then the backlash to the backlash was like, why are you guys mad? She was simply stating a personal preference.
Watching y'all crash out over Slim Kim saying that she wants to be skinny is starting to get a little scary. If I could cancel my DoorDash membership, you too will be trying to have a search party to look for my waist. What is wrong with that?
I think the funniest part of this whole situation is that Slim Kim began her video by saying, I fear you can't say this anymore, then proceeded to say, I like being skinny. I say it's funny because one of our most dominant cultural narratives is that being skinny is a good thing, and if you are a young woman, especially one that was brought up in the 90s and early 2000s, this was shoved down your throat. So what Slim Kim said was not new or radical, but the immense response she received made it seem like it was. Slim Kim prefaced her statement with, I fear you can't say this. So I think Slim Kim put this disclaimer because ever since the mid-2010s, when body positivity gained traction, the explicit glorification of thinness at any and all costs was, for the first time in a while, frowned upon. Suddenly, it wasn't cool when Victoria's Secret angels bragged about eating egg whites and almonds to stay in shape. Brands like Abercrombie, who were known for their rigid exclusivity, did a complete 180 and started focusing on diversity. In 2014, the underwear brand Aerie launched a campaign where they vowed to stop photoshopping models. Meanwhile, Kim Kardashian popularized the concept of being a white woman with a butt. Even with all these strides, I don't think thinness lost any staying power or prestige. Beauty standards just became a little bit more malleable. The progress that the body positivity movement made seems to have slowly waned over the past few years As early as 2021, publications ran stories that speculated thin was back in, thanks to fashion trends like low-rise jeans, and ever since then, the sentiment has gained more and more traction. I think this is precisely why Slim Kim felt empowered to say that she loved being skinny. There was already a maelstrom of media with the exact same message. I don't think Slim Kim had bad intentions, but her statement promoted toxic rhetoric. In so many words, she was paraphrasing that old Kate Moss quote, "Nothing tastes as good as skinny feels." Honestly, I think the response to Slim Kim's video was so reactionary that a lot of people missed that it could have been a cry for help. We live in a world where women are told the thinner you are, the more valuable you are. So when you come out and say, I have something controversial to tell you, and it's, I love being skinny, that's all I think about, at best, it's a lukewarm take, and at worst, maybe you have an eating disorder. One of the characteristics of anorexia is incessant pursuit of thinness and an intense fear of gaining weight. But eating disorders are largely associated with upwardly mobile white women, and the primary reason for that is white women were the only people with these problems who underwent study. Specialists conducted most of the early research in this area on college campuses or in hospital clinics for reasons related to economics, access to care, and cultural attitudes towards psychological treatment. Middle-class white females were the ones seeking treatment and thus the ones who became the subjects of research. I think that's important to keep in mind with Slim Kim's video. How would her statement be perceived if it came out of a white woman's mouth?
I love being skinny. I have been the thick woman. I was the thickest woman. I was known as the woman who's thick. I love my life so much more now.
This is a video that a creator posted in July of 2024, so a few months before Kim's video, and as far as I know, it resulted in no discourse or backlash. I just think the difference in response is very interesting. When a white woman says, I love being skinny, there is a degree of like, well, that's their culture. So when Slim Kim said it, it was viewed as a hot take, because generally speaking, thin is not the beauty standard in Black culture. It's not common to see a Black woman so publicly and explicitly express a desire to be skinny. I mean that when I say specifically skinny. I've heard Black women online speak about how they want to lose weight or get in shape or have a snatch waist or express a desire for their body to be T, but it is very rare to hear a Black woman say she wants to be skinny. Wanting to be explicitly thin or skinny is much more customary amongst white women. In Black communities, skinny is often an insult. And this is not to say that white people don't get bullied for being skinny by other white people. I'm sure that happens.
Oh, okay. Are we good? Can we come in? But no, look at what it's, oh, okay. Yeah.
But generally speaking, in white communities, especially amongst white women, being thin is a status symbol and highly glorified. But it wasn't always like this. Hundreds of years before Kim Kardashian, there was a moment in time where it was desirable to be a thick white woman. During the Renaissance era in Europe, women with fuller figures were associated with health, fertility, and wealth. A well-nourished body symbolized prosperity and the ability to bear children, which were highly valued traits at the time. Thinness was often linked to poverty or illness, making a more robust figure a visual representation of status and well-being. In Viewing the Black Body, Dr. Sabrina Strings writes extensively about how thinness became racialized and associated with whiteness. I didn't get a chance to read this book, but I found a very comprehensive review by Hannah Carlin, which gives a high-level overview of how this came to be. European perceptions of body size were deeply intertwined with the social and economic changes of the 16th century. As slavery and colonization intensified, the surge in sugar production, referred to as white gold, transformed European diets and brought about new anxieties around fat, particularly among men. During the early Enlightenment, thinness began to symbolize male rationality, while corpulence was seen as a marker of laziness and intellectual inferiority. Thinkers like Shakespeare and Descartes criticized excess body fat as a barrier to higher thought. These ideas were further reinforced by the post-Reformation emphasis on self-discipline and morality, where avoiding gluttony became a critical value. By the late 17th century, fatness became tied to racial categorization. Early race scientists like George Cuvier, J.J. Viry, and George Louis Leclerc linked gluttony and laziness to Africans, often blaming the warm climates for their so-called idleness, echoing colonial stereotypes about other regions like India. During the Enlightenment, rationalist ideals turned food and body size into moral markers, with thinness now seen as a symbol of intellectual and moral superiority. Anthropologists and naturalists use these ideas to reinforce a racial hierarchy, often targeting the bodies of Southern African women. Figures like Starkey Bartman were reduced to objects of ridicule and voyeuristic fascination, displayed in Culver's traveling ethnographic exhibitions, where enslaved women were grotesquely exoticized. The 19th century's expansion of the American empire ushered in a medicalized disdain for the robust African woman, grounded in biased assumptions and cultural prejudices. These pseudoscientific ideas lacked empirical evidence and were primarily used to uphold existing social hierarchies. With the arrival of new immigrants in the United States, concerns about preserving the dominance of Northwest Europeans, particularly as Celts and Irish had only recently been incorporated into Anglo-Saxon whiteness, began to rise. To reinforce white supremacy over immigrants and enslaved Africans, thinness increasingly became a marker of both racial and class superiority, shaping the standard for American beauty. This is all to say, for the past couple centuries, blackness and thinness have been at odds, and I think this is why there's different body beauty standards between Black and white communities. Sabrina Strings even wrote that her research was largely inspired by her Black Southern grandmother, who, upon moving to California in the 1960s, was mystified by white women's intense desire to be thin. It's a surprise to no one that losing weight isn't a priority when you're literally fighting for your life in the Jim Crow South. Similar to Europeans during the Renaissance, it's easy to see why a fuller figure symbolizes health and prosperity within Black communities. There's generally much less aversion to fat, especially if it's in the right places. There's a value of shapeliness over skinniness. Even though there's more acceptance of curves in the Black community, I still think a lot of Black women struggle with this because they feel that they don't have the right shape. Thick thighs, a tiny waist, and a bulbous booty. This shape is especially desirable and important for Black female entertainers, specifically singers and rappers. It's how Beyonce looks. It's how Megan Thee Stallion looks. It's why SZA got a BBL. It's why Doechii got a BBL. It's why Summer Walker got a BBL. It's why Lotto got a BBL. It's why the reaction to Ice Spice's weight loss has been tepid. And while many people point to the Kardashians' removal of their BBLs as a sign that thin is in and that this body type and surgery are no longer desirable, I don't think that it applies for a large part of the Black community, because there's simply a different beauty standard when it comes to body types. Tyla, for example, who is very slim, has even expressed a desire to be thicker.
No, me, I want a juicy bag.
Are you on a diet right now?
No, I don't do diets. I don't want to be low. Like, I want to eat anything. Everything. Like,
even though these singers and rappers' demographics have probably whitened as they've propelled into mainstream fame, their initial audience and their core audience has been Black, so they are following Black beauty standards. These audiences aren't going to be so easily impacted or swayed by the Kardashians removing their BBLs and the thin is in narrative, because they are ultimately just playing a different game. I think the thin is in narrative is more likely to impact Black entertainers with mainstream, aka white audiences, because thinness can be used as a way to assimilate. Someone like Zendaya comes to mind. Obviously, being biracial has made her more palatable for white audiences, and on top of that, I think her being skinny has immensely helped her career, because to mainstream audiences, she is viewed as aspirational. On the same note, this applies to non-famous Black women who find themselves in predominantly white spaces. If you can't fit in because of your skin color, you can conform with your body. About a year ago, I made a video called "Why Do White Men Love Black Women with Bad Wigs?" and I mainly talked about the bad wig aspect of it, but in the TikTok sound that inspired that video, the creator said, "No one can pull a white millionaire like a slim Black woman with a bad wig." The slim part matters. For Black women, being thin is often a prerequisite to fit into wealthy, mostly white spaces. It feels paradoxical because some of the most visible and successful Black women are the entertainers who I mentioned, who have this BBL body type, but if you're not trying to achieve upward mobility through singing or rapping, mediums where a certain brand of unabashed Blackness is valued, a lot of times conforming to rigid white beauty standards is what can propel your career and access to privilege. That's why Slim Kim said what she said. She's not an alien. She lives on planet Earth with the rest of us. It's why she knows that being skinny is beneficial, especially as a Black woman who aspires to be upwardly mobile. This is also why eating disorders in African American women relate to the degree to which they have assimilated into the dominant American social milieu, that is, how much they have adopted the values and behaviors of the prevailing, aka white, culture. Not surprisingly, African American women who are the most assimilated equate thinness with beauty and place great importance on physical attractiveness. It is these typically younger, more educated, and perfection-seeking women who are at most risk of succumbing to eating disorders. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up now. I'm kind of going to end where I started by saying I still don't like the phrase thin as in because I don't think it ever went away, but it did inspire me to make this video and to think about Black women's relationship to thinness, because I do think it's quite fascinating and nuanced, and as someone who grew up in a predominantly white environment, it was always top of mind because trying to be skinny was one of the many ways that I attempted to fit in. So I'm very curious to hear if you have any of the same experiences or different runs or your general thoughts below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!